1400 to 1910, the world experienced many developments in the area of music. During the Renaissance, Baroque, classical, and Romantic eras, new ideas, instruments, and many demands for change helped music to increasingly advance throughout that period. Composers were inspired to create many intricate and emotional pieces. At that time, the music was celebrated and loved. However, in modern times, the genre of music is not so well known. Personally, as a lifetime music student, I have played and enjoyed classical music. However, many people in my age group have no interest in this style of music. In this documentary, I would try to answer the question, is classical music still relevant in our society today? To discover for myself what is the current view for the future of classical music, I have decided to interview some of my past and present music teachers who all have unique experiences and knowledge about music. First, they talk about how they were introduced to music and the type of music that they like the most. They then answer a series of questions about the importance of music and how classical music can be reawakened today.
Hi Daniel, thanks for including me in your documentary. Yeah, I started early, but remember I was born in the 50s, so we only had radio, and there was only maybe 2 FM stations that played classical music and popular music, and maybe 3 AM stations. So yeah, that was our only entertainment. There was no internet, no television yet in our home. And then everything changed when my father bought a turntable, and then we started to collect albums and share albums and listening together, and you would play the same album for hours and hours. My older sister was also playing piano, so there was no escape. I was exposed to classical music very early.
I started playing the cello in grade 5 through a school music education program. I didn't really take it too seriously until about grade 10, where I think the Elgar Concerto sparked my interest in the cello a lot more, so I started practicing a lot more, trying to get to that level where I can play it proficiently.
And just basically, what's your favorite style of music?
My favorite style of music right now would be the Baroque era. Everything is so intricate, and the way it's played, it really resonates with how I feel about it.
My favorite style of music. So I have a very eclectic style of music. I like all kinds of music, a very eclectic taste in music. So I'm into basically anything that makes me feel good. So it kind of changes throughout my life. So currently I would say my favorite style of music would probably be house music. So house music is known to have a lot of strong, heavy beats, a lot of like a strong, heavy bass line, and it can be a very rhythmic music, which I really enjoy. Just going back to the aspect of movement, I find that very beneficial for me. So I enjoy something that makes me want to move. And so that would be my favorite style of music currently. That being said, depending on my mood, I do put on and do listen to different styles. So oftentimes if I'm heading to bed or I'm putting my son to bed, I'll put on something a little bit more soothing. And in my playlist of songs to kind of unwind and relax, I do have some classical music that I listen to that can help me soothe my body, soothe my mind, just kind of bring everything down. There is classical music though that is more upbeat, more fast-paced, and again, just to kind of depends on what I'm interested in doing and how I feel for that day.
Just because somebody says, "Do you like classical music?" it doesn't mean you have to like. You want to go? Go ahead. You don't have to like everything. Just like with any music, You can like some pieces and not be too crazy about others. That's the case with me. I never got into Brahms. I never really bought any albums of Mendelssohn, but I love Chopin. I love Beethoven. I love Bach. And not everything, right? Some Mozart pieces irritate me, and some move me to tears. So I would encourage younger people that are not familiar with classical music, don't just give up after listening to a couple of songs. Maybe those are the ones that you actually don't like. And but one day you will come across a piece that will move you, and you'll be sold.
So yes, as a piano teacher, I do teach classical music because that is oftentimes what is required for students to move forward, especially in the Royal Conservatory of Music repertoire. So classical music is what is required to teach. Do I enjoy teaching it? Yes, I do. I think there's some really cool elements within classical music that are important for students to learn. And I also think there's something to be said about kind of starting from like the foundation and the history and the roots of music being classical, and then noticing how it's changed and evolved as time has progressed. Oftentimes my students do prefer to learn more upbeat and popular music, but what I try to do with them is to show them that there are comparisons between some of the classical music that we're learning and then some of the new music you hear on the radio. So they might hear trills in the new up-to-date music, and that's what we'll learn in some of our classical pieces, or different runs and different keys, and then you'll hear that in new music which you're learning in the classical music. So there's the benefits there.
What genre of music do you play and teach most often?
Probably classical. I've played a lot of different genres. In the past, I've done a lot of work with Bollywood shows in Toronto, as well as like community theater and that kind of stuff.
Do your students enjoy playing classical music, or do they ask to learn more familiar songs like heard on the radio?
I find a lot of my students actually enjoy playing the classical side of it. It's like for them it's a big change to the music you hear on the radio these days. But there are a few that like have their favorite songs that they would like to play, and of course we would try to learn them as well. A lot of like music is based off of classical technique anyways, so it transitions really nicely.
Do you think music, but more specifically classical music, is an important part of a child's education?
I think it's not just only classical music, it's all music, because it helps develop your brain and it makes you it allows a lot more critical thinking.
So I totally think that classical music is important for children to learn, especially from a young age. There's very important elements in classical music that I think are beneficial to a child's development. Even when a child is really young, like a baby, you'll play classical music, which can be very soothing and very calming. There's elements of classical music that can help regulate the nervous system and probably help to create and generate creativity in the mind and to help develop the brain. So definitely I think that's important for young children, especially to learn classical music. I do think that classical music, it's classical, so it's considered old. So I don't necessarily think it's dying off. It's a part of history, and it's a part of what a lot of music has started from. So it's kind of like the foundation. But I definitely do think it's not the most popular genres of music. Definitely not. How can we revitalize that as a society? I think that maybe a way to revitalize it is looking or bringing classical music into more popular or mainstream media. So right now, social media, of course, is huge and big. Kids nowadays are on all forms of social media. So if there's a way that we can use classical music in some of those forms, it would be great. Also, we have popular musicians now that different genres of music, whether it's R&B, hip hop, whatever, salad music, reggae, soca, Afro beats. If they can utilize classical music and elements of classical music, that can probably help to revitalize the whole genre in itself. Movies is a good way to probably bring out classical music. So anything where I think that the public and mainstream forms of entertainment, if we can use classical music in those pieces of those pieces of work, that would be great, I think, as a way to kind of make classical music come back to the forefront.
What would make the classical music more popular? I think we would have to have an American Idol classical edition, and then you would have all these good-looking girls and boys playing Chopin, and everybody would be in love with them. I think we need something like that. I don't understand really the obsession with a recorder in the elementary schools. Like the first thing that people learn is the recorder. Well, nobody wants to play the recorder, so maybe there has to be more funding to buy more pianos, more guitars, more violins, instruments that actually people wanted to play, and that would make a big difference, I think. Provide a space in your schools after hours for people to get together and practice, together, rehearse together, not necessarily just the band. What happens, the band movement is pretty good in high schools, but what happens if you play cello or violin? There's no room for you in a band, so there has to be a little bit more versatile approach to teaching music in schools. I don't think the classical music is going away. It's not gonna go anywhere. The problem is, how do you make money? How do you support yourself as a classical composer? Well, the only choice, really almost the only choice, is to write soundtracks for films. So you're exposed to some sort of version of classical music in every epic film that you've seen. I can imagine portraying what the character is going through a pop song. It has to be the classical score that kind of helps you understand the character in the movie. Please explore outside of your field, just because you like a certain band or a certain singer. It kind of really lowers your perspective if you only listen to that genre of music.
Would you say that the popularity of classical music is diminishing and the style is at risk of dying?
For sure. Classical music used to be very popular back in the days for very, very rich or very rich or people that are very affluent. But nowadays it's starting to die off because it's seen as a genre for older people.